Hello, hello. How's everyone doing? Let's see who we've got on the attendees. Some names I definitely recognise. Barati, how are you? Bushra, obviously know very well. Some new names there as well. Just to kick us off, we will jump in properly in the next 1 to 2 minutes. Just post your name, quick hello, and where you are based. You can throw in a fun fact if you want as well to add a bit of spice to it. Whilst we're waiting, I will just test screen share before we get started. Good, excellent. Okay, great. So feel free to post in the chat where you're from, name, job title, these kind of things. Ashwini out in Bangalore. I have been there, really nice city. Busha out in Zurich, of course. Good. Bharti out in Sydney as well. FIFA in Pakistan. I'm actually going to be there in a month for a wedding in Islamabad. Vasily out in Bucharest. Belinda in London, not too far from me. Vikas out in Delhi. Makdi in Amsterdam. Sheffield, Dublin. Just looking for a PM role. Great. Well, you're in the right place. South Africa, Abuja. Great. Awesome. Very international. Excellent. Sandy out in India as well. Good. Great. It's always interesting to know where people are from as well. Andy in Glasgow as well. What are we going to cover today? So in terms of the expected outcome, well, let's do an overview of what we're going to cover. So first thing I'm going to do is give you a bit of theory on like how we approach planning a dashboard, and then really just in 5-10 minutes cover that core theory. And then for the bulk of the session, so really 45 minutes, we are then going to put that into practice, looking at a real product hunt, and actually planning, mapping out an analytics dashboard for that product. So I'm going to share my screen to start. We will, however, be using Miro for this session. So I'm going to post that Miro link now. I will repost it for anyone that joins later. Bushra, if you could do me a favor, if you see people joining late and asking about where the link is, you're probably going to have to repost it if it gets lost amongst the chat. So if someone can repost that, that would be massively appreciated. Annoyingly, you can't pin post. Thanks for that. Good, so let's jump in. As I said, I'll screen share for the start. You can, however, follow this on Miro if you want. It is completely up to you. And I have shared that link with you. There we go. I'll reshare that just in case. Excellent. Okay, good. So what are we going to cover today? What's the expected outcome today, even? Really to understand what we should include on an analytics dashboard, because that is far more important than learning how to actually implement analytics specifically. You know, we work in product, we have teams. Yes, it's great if you learn how to code, you know how to implement analytics. But what's more important is making sure we're actually tracking the right stuff in the first place. So in terms of the outcome, it's really about becoming much more confident understanding metrics and how we actually apply them in practice through this hands-on real-world case study that we're going to look at today. In terms of the specific challenge, what that case study is, we're going to be building an analytics dashboard, really a plan for Product Hunt. That is a platform for discovering the best new products in tech. So not yet. Later, when we start this exercise, you can just click this card here and open up the link. I will also share that on the chat when it comes to doing the exercise. So don't worry about Product Hunt yet. Don't go off and check it out. We will, have lots of time to do that. Specifically, there are going to be 3 steps involved today. So firstly is quite simply writing out, what do we think key metrics, what are the key metrics for this product? That forms the basis of what ultimately we want to put on our dashboard. What do we mean by key metrics? What are the most important things to measure for us as a product, but also for us as a business? Okay, so for us as a product and as a business. Secondly, so you've got that sort of rough idea of what you would want to include in terms of key metrics. Step 2 is then looking at the 6 different types of report that we can work with to actually formulate each metric. And we'll talk about what reports are and how they work shortly. So essentially using tools, in this case, we're looking at Mixpanel, but really the principles are the same across most of these analytics platforms. We have 6 types of ways of slicing and dicing data. So we're going to look at those 6 and essentially go, okay, so we've got our rough idea of what we want to track, list of key metrics. What can we actually track based on those 6 reports? And third, we're going to also look at key metrics just through a slightly different lens, something called the Pirate framework, so AARRR. I'm going to go through that one by one just to help you think about the sort of the different types of key metric we want to add. So we'll make sure we're really covering all bases, everything that's important to the product. We've got a key metric or more than one key metric for each of those. Good. So I've got a bit of a cold, so I will be coughing and sniffing a little bit throughout this session. Good. So we understand what we're going to do. It's ultimately mapping out key metrics for Product Hunt, and then we're going to review each step to see how people have approached this. Again, there's no right or wrong answer here. Different ways to think about, depending on what you think is most important. So we're going to do section by section, different types of key metrics, and then review them at each stage there. So last 2 bits of theory before we jump in. So firstly, what types of report can we work with? Okay. And secondly, we're going to look at something called Pirate metrics here. I'm going to show you an example from Twitter. I've just got a few ideas for kind of key metrics that they might track. So we're going to have a look at each type of these as an example to kick us off. So firstly, we have, and again, if you're following, just come up to the top here. This is our example section, and below we've got the workspaces that you'll all be using today. So just zooming in here, and these are color coded. So the first thing we have, if we look at an example dashboard, this is on Mixpanel. This is where we're showing all of our data. We need to work out, okay, well, what can we actually show there? And that's where these types of report come in. So on Mixpanel, and again, this is true of most of these analytics platforms. Firstly, we have something called a raw event. This is where we have something called an event that is sent to Mixpanel when something in our product is triggered. For example, when the user clicks a button, for example, when they submit, maybe their email, when they log in, for example. Okay, so this is what we call an event. So something happens and it's sent to wherever we're tracking that, in this case, Mixpanel. Example of that would be maybe for Twitter that we're going to track number of events per day, specifically likes. So how many likes happen? Maybe likes total, maybe it's likes per tweet, for example. What's the average there? Secondly, we've got user properties. So this is where we can track properties of the user that we have tracked. Might be things like, in many cases, these are things that are default tracked, like device, location. We can see the events that were triggered by a specific user, for example. In this case, for Twitter, maybe we track the type of device. We're interested, are there differences if someone's using mobile versus desktop, for example? In the case of Twitter, highly likely. So that's going to be quite important. Third, we have what we call funnels. This is a series of events a user should trigger to achieve a desired outcome. Right? i.e., what do we want them to do ideally? For Twitter, maybe that is we want to track, okay, how many people are signing up and then viewing their first timeline, right? Because that's the sort of key value of Twitter, right? Scrolling through all these apparently exciting tweets, and then maybe even liking our first tweet. And that's what we say is a really important funnel for us. Here's an example visualization of a rider activation funnel for Uber, for example. 4, retention. So this is where we're essentially tracking the percentage of users who actually stick around. Now, depending on the product, we might look at day 1 retention. We might look at, did they come out the next day? Is it just every 7 days? Is it over 30 days? Depends what makes sense for your specific product. For something like Twitter, it's sort of regular usage. We might, we might think that day 7 retention is really important, that they're using it, i.e., at least a couple of times per week. As I said, 30-day retention is something that we track. Could be 7-day, for example. 5th, segmentation. This is where we get a little bit more complex. We can uncover some really interesting insights and basically see, if we're grouping users based on different events or different user properties that are there to uncover insights. For example, we might segment users based on, are they mobile versus desktop? And then see, well, what kind of different behaviors are there? Like, are some people tweeting more on mobile versus desktop? Are they liking more on mobile versus desktop? And by doing so, we're going to uncover some really interesting insights there. So we might segment users based on events or user properties. And finally, we've got something called flows. This is where we might discover different paths users actually follow. So we're going to see ultimately, like, rather than with a funnel where we see what do we want people to do, flows, what are people actually doing? Right? They might be, going off and doing something we didn't think was that important in our product, and actually that turns out to be the sort of core value of it. For example, we might simply see that people aren't doing things in the order that we thought. Maybe it's, they view tweets, then they tweet themselves, and only after that do they start liking other tweets, for example. So we might uncover some interesting behavior there. And again, and that might inform, what we build next or what we consider the core value to be. So those are our 6 types. And you'll see here on that Twitter example, I've got an example of each of those there for you. Flows is the only one that we can't really put into a specific pirate metric. It's really just to see what's going on, get a general overview of what's going on there. So those are the kind of reports we can use. I saw there's a question, I will come to that shortly. Let's now look at why I've grouped them in these columns. You see we've got these 5 columns here, and this is something called pirate metrics or the R framework, where essentially product is not about just retention or getting them to do these sort of those key steps we talked about with Twitter, maybe viewing tweets and liking tweets. Product is essentially all of the building blocks that are involved from acquisition, i.e. how do we actually acquire people, how do we acquire the right people, to step 2, activation, i.e. getting them to get to some sort of core value, for example, viewing tweets, liking tweets. Retention, right? Obviously retaining them, keeping them in the ecosystem, sometimes not important. For most products is very important. 4, revenue, right? How are we actually generating revenue from them so we can ultimately balance our books and keep ourselves sustainable. And 5th, referral as well. So how are we trying to leverage referral, whether that's through word of mouth or deliberately through the design of our product to feed in, more users to that product, for example. So we have these 5 different building blocks, and they're just for sake of today, that's just to help you think of, 5 buckets that we might put key metrics in and help you sort of think of other things beyond the obvious, in this case, the obvious one being the sign up funnel, for example. So that's the theory. We've got these 6 types of reports we can work with, and we're going to put them in these 5 different buckets. So I'll come to that question shortly. Before we jump into the interactive session, I'll cover that question. We're going to go through step by step. So I'm going to do a 5-minute timer where you're going to come up with the key metrics related to acquisition specifically. And then we're going to move on to activation, retention, revenue, referral. Okay. So let me just answer this question from Shafali. So for considering retention, do you mean active users in that time period or passive users as well who just install app but seldom open it? Great question. It depends how we define it. So we might create a report in Mixpanel. Sorry, that should actually have been locked. That board. Anyway, not to worry. Look, 1 second. So for example, we might say, if we're tracking retention here, see this graph about retained riders. Well, you might categorize that based on just anybody who's signed up because they have an intention to ride. Or you might say people who have, for example, generally this is how we do it. They've completed that key action, like they've booked their first Uber. And now we want to see, do they book it again in future, for example? Yeah, great question. So it depends how you think we should define it. And again, this is why we're going to use a new product or product sounds something new to you to say, well, what do you think makes sense in terms of tracking retention in that specific example? Good. So let's jump into the first exercise. So first thing I'd like everybody to do is open up, I will share this link, open up Product Hunt so you can explore that product. You're going to have 5 minutes to explore Product Hunt, grab one of these boards below, and just write out what do you think are the key metrics for acquisition specifically, right? Acquisition being, okay, where do we find people and then how do we get them through to some sort of core experience, for example, sign up, okay? When you add your key metric, 2 tips. One, be very specific. Okay, what exactly are we measuring and how? And 2, I'd like you to color code it to show the kind of report that you think this might be. Okay, you've got some ideas up here with Twitter. I've deliberately only done a few. I want you to really think through from first principles, i.e. without bias. What do you think really makes sense? What do you think would be really important for this product? So if everybody grab a board, if you roughly go where your name is, if you're Catherine C, around here is fine. If you're called Grant, maybe over here. If it's Murat, over here somewhere, for example. So everybody has a board. I'll set a 5-minute timer. You will see that in the top right of Miro. And 5 minutes, more than enough time. Acquisition, there's not so many metrics you can think of, but I'm going to give you enough time to really explore Product Hunt, understand what the product does, and then get, maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 key metrics just for that first column, just for acquisition to get you started. Excellent. Just quickly color code if you haven't done so already. Just the last 10 seconds or so, just to quickly color code. Really important because it's great to start thinking, okay, well, what metrics make sense, but also we need to make sure we're able to track them. We understand how to track them as well. And good. Let's have a look at a few examples. So let's have a look at Kurushi. So Kurushi, you have a few interesting ones here in terms of raw events. You've got some of the obvious ones like sign up. Good. So many people had that. Viewed page. Yeah. Okay. So I think you mean specifically product page and then view product here. We'll come back to these. I think this is worth discussing. You've also got things like user properties, device. Yeah, good. I saw somebody else had a few interesting things here. Catherine, was it? Yeah, device, browser, channel. Source. Like, where are people coming from? Is it from Facebook? Is it from our ads? Whatever it might be. Demographic. Yeah, good, but be specific. What do you mean specifically here, and what kind of data might we be able to collect that we do want? What would we want to collect? Role might be important. For example, like when we sign people up, maybe we don't just get their email, we also get, what is your role? Is it founder? Is it product manager? Whatever it might be. Interesting. Karishi also has added funnels, so total viewed products to sign up conversion and viewed how to post to sign up conversion. Interesting. So this is where we have this tension, and this is what we'll talk about with the next example, next section. What do we define as acquisition and activation? Right? Activation meaning that aha moment where they understand or they get some sort of core value from the product. And that's, not always clear, for example. So in the next exercise, we're going to do the activation column. And again, I'm going to do a 4-minute timer in this case. What kind of things would you want to track related to activation here? So how do we define activation? Again, it's that aha moment, that moment where they really get it. They get lots of value from our product. So you're going to do 4-minute timer. We'll look at a few examples. I'm actually going to ask a few people to come on stage as well and just talk through their thinking here. So 4 minutes starting now. Just a hint here to have a look at the Twitter example and see what activation means in that specific example. I also think of the differences maybe in the products. Just over 1 minute to go. Remember to color code as well. Final point, try to include at least one funnel here. So that pink orange card, the funnel. Excellent. Let me share my screen and we'll have a look at a few examples. Let's go down and have a look at, I think it was Mike. So how are we defining activation here? I'm just going to ask that question to everybody. Actually, I'll zoom out. How are you defining that moment of activation? Just feel free to write on the chat. Any ideas? How are you defining activation here? Crucial engagement in community. Continuous engagement. Yeah, activation specifically. Yeah, Catherine, the value to product is meant to achieve. Okay, so the value the product is meant to achieve. Yeah, in this case, it's a tricky one because we have, what are we considering activation? Now, obviously, there's the element of viewing products, right? That's the sort of the core value here. But yeah, commenting, sharing as well. Excellent. To do that, we need to get them to sign up ultimately. Right? That needs to be part of this funnel. We want to get them to vote and not just view products, but engage in some way. Yeah, Shafali, upvote, comment, discuss, newsletter, product. Really engaging with what's on there rather than just browsing in some way. So in fact, what we could do is, do we define acquisition? Yeah, it's the channels before they get to the website, but also potentially the product pages themselves, right? So view product page, you could put an acquisition. In an activation, we could talk about, a funnel of view product to sign up to like or upvote in this case, for example. So there's a few different ways we might look at it. And we have that funnel, and also we've got, Mike has here raw events, I think are important here. Are people commenting in their first session? Are they upvoting specifically? And also, what about number of products that they're visiting? Because it's about discovering cool new products. So we want them to be looking at multiple products in this case. Good. So again, it's not a clear-cut one. It really depends. Like, what do we think is most important, and how do we structure that initial funnel? In their case, they deliberately, you're allowed to browse content. That's going to trigger you to then sign up and become active in some way. I think Barati as well, some nice ideas here. Yeah, a number of users who sign up to vote and then who leave comments as well. I think it's a really good funnel. Number of searches per week. Yeah, search potentially, but I think in this case it's more about discovering, because these are products we don't know the we don't know the names of, by their very nature that we're discovering new products. So I'd say maybe a number of product pages that we visit, like this, for example. But yeah, you're in the right sort of right ballpark, essentially. Shaifali, how many total products get posted each week comes in acquisition or activation? Good question. Good question. How many total products get? What do people think? Do you want to post your answers to that? I'll just feature that question. So do we think number of products getting posted each week comes in acquisition or activation? Maybe a trick question as well. Bushra, for whom? Good question. Well, good counter argument. Belinda, activation. Yeah, just post which one and why you think that's the case. Okay, let's see any more answers coming through. Neither seems like a North Star for product hunt curiosity. Yeah, good. I think you could put this in any group, right? In terms of acquisition, we could put it there because it's ultimately if I go and share this this cool new product that I've discovered, then I'm going to be helping with acquisition. For example, could also put it in referral in that case. It may help with activation because I browse and I go, these are sort of cool, but actually, wow, this one's awesome. And that's the one that I upvote. That's one that I comment on. Activation. Other columns as well, retention, for example, there's an argument it could be put in there for sure. So there's an argument to put it in different ones. I think Karishi said, yeah, it seems like a bit of a North Star. This is a really powerful metric across all of our key building blocks of product. So yeah, great contribution there. Good. Let's move on to the next one. So retention. I'm going to do a 4-minute timer and same exercise. 4-minute timer to write up key metrics for retention. So try and go beyond just saying, 30-day retention or 7-day retention. Like what specific raw events, maybe funnels, for example, might be really important here. Try to think of sort of specific actions somebody might take that might bring them back, for example, what might drive retention. Excellent. Let's look at a few examples. So Belinda's got some nice ideas. So she's got login frequency. So this is what we'd call 30-day retention or 7-day, where we're basically seeing like how many times did somebody at all come back over a 7-day period or over a 30-day period, for example. Raw events that are really important. Most important things like, are they placing votes? Because that's going to show that's okay, great, they're logging in, but are they really engaging with the core functionality of discovering and upvoting cool new products? Why? Because a vote sort of shows you're getting value from something. It's like you like the product in some way. Leaving a comment as well. Yes, we might look at, track a number of comments left per month, a number of comments placed, number of votes that somebody has placed, give us a good indication of retention. And obviously we've got that high level overview by just seeing, do they log in or do they open the app in some way? Excellent. Let's look at another example. I think Chrissy's got another 14-day retention. Interesting. Chrissy, why specifically did you choose 14 out of interest? And there are also some interesting, you've got, I think Catherine as well looked at this sort of things out, ultimately we want to drive retention through the product itself, like product-led growth, where we're saying, really zooming in on the core functionality. So liking, commenting, number of new products viewed, because we know that's, if somebody's doing lots of that, then we are more likely to retain them because they're getting continuous value. There are, however, other things, acquisition might be email reminders, that kind of thing that we want to track as well there. So yeah, there's a few different ways we can look at this. Let's go on to step 4. For step 4, I don't want you to add key metrics. I want you to just answer a question. I'll get you to post on the chat itself. So if you could pick one thing that might drive revenue for us as a business, what key metric would you, so if you could measure, one thing that might drive revenue, what would that one thing be? So just do a 2-minute timer, just to really think that one through. You can add it to your board if you want, but feel free to post it on the chat. So revenue model, just to be crystal clear, is paying for a featured product. I think they also have adverts as well. Awesome. Good. So feel free to post these ideas. Got some interesting ones there. Yeah. So Bharat, you could look at number of subscriptions to this sort of this paid feature called Ship, where you can post, get certain posting privileges. So Shy Finally as well, Founder Club subscription. You could, Belinda, interesting, increase in activation of invites to Founder Club, i.e. are we improving our conversion there as well? Yeah, would be important as well. Yeah, good. Other thing you could look at, depending on the types of persona, most founders are only going to post once, I imagine in many cases, but you could look at, are they getting continuous value by coming back and posting a new product? So maybe you have an idea of how many, products they're creating per year versus how many they're actually posting through Product Hunt would be quite interesting as well. Yeah, Shakala, retention of Founder Club user. Good. So yeah, depends what you think is most important. Do you think that people are only going to post once and it's about getting that initial subscription, or do you think it's about retention and founders posting multiple times, for example? Good. Let's do our final exercise of today before we jump into Q&A. Referral. So what is referral? Essentially, any way that we're going to drive the sharing of the product in some way. Okay. So some sort of sharing where we're essentially getting other people to come to that share, getting users to in some way attract, not just invite, but attract other people to that product. So do a 4-minute timer for that final column today, referral. Awesome. Let's do a final look at these. Sorry, I just tracked down somebody's board. There's a good example here, Catherine. Good. So you've got things like, sharing on social channels. Yeah. So if we color coded that, we might do, I'll actually come on to another example. We need to be more specific. Well, what do we mean by that? How do we track it? Things like word of mouth, great idea, but we can't track it. Right? That's the reality of our product. So we might, in that case, we might say, well, this is a key metric, but what can we do instead? Is there sort of a surrogate metric there? How might we track that in different ways? So you might even tie that back to acquisition, and during your sign up, have that box which asks, how did you hear about us? That kind of thing. If word of mouth is really powerful for you, if you want to understand what's going on there. But we can't actually, track it in a raw form. Have another look at Belinda again, some really nice examples. So see how very specific here, number of users tapping share button, posting on Facebook or Twitter, right? This we can track very easily. Here, there are tools we can use to sort of track as well. So I think this is great. Number of users who send an invite link, for example, or on acquisition, we can see number of users who sign up through invite link, for example. Excellent. In terms of funnels, yes, we might be looking at, okay, well, what is that sign up funnel specifically for people receive an invite link, for example? Number of invites per user. I would not say that's a funnel. I would say it's a raw event, but good thinking, essentially. Good. So let's pause that exercise. Hopefully, as I said, that gives you a really nice sort of introduction to how we start thinking about an analytics dashboard. And you know what, in terms of the main learning, again, it's not about the tracking of this stuff. Like, yes, it's super helpful to understand how we implement things. It's helpful to understand those 6 types of report that we work with, right? What's actually trackable in practice. But the hard thing and the most important thing is understanding, like, what should we be tracking in the first place? Things like, okay, well, how are we defining activation? Because that's going to inform hugely what we do and like how we construct the whole product journey. If we think it's not just about viewing products in the product example, it's really about upvoting and commenting on those products, then maybe we move sign up around, for example, or we really try and push upvoting as a key action that they take early on. So by tracking the right thing in our dashboard is not something we do retrospectively. It can also help us define actually how the product should look in the first place and what the most important things are to focus on. So today's just a bit of an introduction to that. Obviously, it'd be great to dive into the theory deeper in terms of, what pirate metrics, for example, in terms of the types of metrics we have available. I didn't see many examples of segmentation, which can be a really powerful tool. So looking at, for example, ratio of product creators versus consumers, that kind of thing is very interesting, can be very powerful. So there is a depth to this topic that we're unable to go through in just 1 hour. So hopefully you enjoyed that. And I think for people that want to sort of take the next step and really jump into the topic of analytics and metrics generally, my only ask today, we do have a next cohort coming up for our product analytics bootcamp. So check that out. I will share the link right now. That's something I run with Bushra as well. So we come at that really hands-on, actionable ways to understand and actually implement product analytics and metrics. So feel free to check that out. We have a next cohort in October. Bharati, thank you, has attended this worthy course to attend, come a long way since attending the course. That's great to hear. Just in the last few minutes, I will open up for Q&A. So if you've got any questions, I think great if you've got things specific to work as well, so we can take this theory, we put it into practice as best possible, and now it's about helping you put it out in the real world. So if you've got any questions, I'm happy to cover those as well. Just feel free to post those on the chat. Glad you enjoyed it, Catherine, as well. And thanks, Bharati, for the kind words. Belinda, question related to the course. Does the course involve creating a dashboard with GA, for example? No, you will create a real dashboard in Mixpanel. So you learn how to implement analytics and come up with a again, not just what we covered today, obviously in more depth about how do we come up with the right metrics, but yeah, how do we actually implement those as well? So that's something we work with. We use Mixpanel, not because it's the best tool, it is a great tool. It's more that it's an easy way to introduce you to all the core topics and core kinds of reports you get in all of these analytics tools, essentially. Shofali, so in the planning phase, let me feature this question. In the planning phase, these metrics will be presented as goals to be achieved. Yeah, this is where we're getting a bit more into bigger topics around how we tie like business outcomes to product strategy. So before we get to planning a dashboard, yeah, we should have defined like, what do we think is really important for us in terms of the business. That might be like revenue targets. And then how does that translate into a product, specific product outcomes? Product outcomes would be, for example, an understanding that more upvotes and more products posted equals better results in terms of acquisition, in terms of activation, in terms of retention, and ultimately revenue. So we'd anchor around what our product strategies are. You focusing on exciting new products, which ties in, number of products posted plus upvotes. And then we go, okay, well, how do we, make sure we're still providing really exciting new products? That's through lots of things posted, lots of comments, lots of upvotes, etc. And that would then frame the things that we think are most important to put on our dashboard, for example. Good. Let's wrap up there then. We're coming to the end of the hour. I know you've got lunch and stuff to go to, maybe some meetings. Thank you everyone for joining. Tandy, thank you for the comment. Glad you enjoyed it. Richard, Alberto, and Rob, sounds like 3 of you sitting around a computer there. Hopefully that was fun. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Belinda, thank you for joining as well. And thank you for the kind words. Hope you enjoyed it. As I said, if you want to go deeper on this, you can't obviously cover everything in 1 hour, then reach out to me on LinkedIn or quite simply click that link and you can book a quick call in with me to give you more info. On there as well, thank you very much for joining. We'll see everybody on the next session in a month or so.